The Viet Cong had just taken over. Charlie Company of the American Division's 11th Infantry Brigade searched for the Viet Cong to destroy, just as they had been ordered. None were found. However, hundreds of Vietnamese civilians, innocent civilians, were murdered in some of the most brutal ways imaginable. This later became known as the My Lai Massacre. Why did this happen? Why were an estimated 350 to 500 people murdered, most of them being women, children, and elderly? Why did this happen? It's because they were told to. Charlie Company was led by Lieutenant William Calley. Calley had instructed them to go through Sun Mi and kill every Viet Cong they saw. He also told them to assume every Vietnamese person they saw was part of the Viet Cong. This clearly wasn't the right thing to do. So why did they do it? They have been taught since they joined the military, since they were born, this sense of obedience, to do as they told, to trust their commander and follow them. Weren't we all taught that when we came here? W.D. Earhart highlights this in his poem, this culture of obedience, in his poem, Coaching Winter Track in Time of War. This theme of he also highlights the adverse effects it can have on you, just blindly following your commander. So this theme of obedience, have you guys ever followed somebody no matter what they said to do? You trusted them so much. Think about when you were younger, your parents, your teachers, coaches. What about following someone who you didn't trust so much, but you still did as they told? And for what reason? Fear? Think of 4 degree year. Think about your family, you didn't want to let them down. Maybe it was a commander, and you thought it was your duty to do as he said, your service. You didn't want to bring dishonor to your name or to your nation. This was expressed in Coaching Winter Track in a Time of War. He's watching them run sprints, following what he's saying, and he's very conflicted. He wants to tell them how the real world works. He asks himself, how do you tell them to question it all? Question everything, even a coach, even a president. He wants to explain to them how the real world works, but he doesn't want to ruin their innocence. So he's conflicted between showing them this cold reality versus their happy innocence. He also uses this theme of innocence. He immediately draws a parallel between the soldiers, between the runners and the soldiers. This poem was written in 2005 when America was fighting in the Middle East. And he compares them running sprints to the soldiers in Baghdad, saying they're cursing like soldiers. However, he almost uses this as a foil, like in a literary sense when you have two characters who are very similar but they have contrasting qualities to highlight different qualities from one another. So he's using their innocence to contrast the harshness and brutality and the violence that the soldiers they deal with on a daily basis. He says, you could fall in love with boys like these, so earnest, so eager, so ready to do whatever you ask, sure of you, trusting, wanting to please, full of themselves, full of the world. Weren't all the soldiers like that? I would bet Earhart was like that. And now he's callous to the world. And he shows how he sets the scene like they're at a battlefield. running the suicides. But then they just get to leave practice and go home and not think anything of it. Whereas the soldiers overseas, they're on their battlefield, but when they get home, they don't get to leave the war they're fighting, the post-traumatic stress disorder. So they have actual harsh consequences, while the young runners, they just run and they're hating life for a little bit, but then they're happy it's all over and they leave, and he tells them good job. And he's highlighting one of the main purposes of this poem, which is to bring light to the issue of post-traumatic stress disorder. So today, over 45 years after the My Lai massacre, there are Americans still facing post-traumatic stress disorder. They're still living with guilt and fear and constant reminders of what they've seen and what they've done. Many other soldiers from all different wars are still fighting the same battle. Soldiers are celebrated before they go off to war and right when they come back. But then it gets to a point where people stop caring, people stop paying attention. And he's really showing how lonely coming back from war is, this post-traumatic stress disorder. He's saying when they leave, he's alone in fading light while memory's phantoms circle the track like weary athletes running a race without a finish line. So unlike the boys running their suicides, and there's a finish line and they end to go home, the soldiers, they're still running. And there isn't a finish line, because they're still going to be dealing with this their whole lives. So not all war poems were written with the intent to tell a story, to tell a brutal, violent story, or to show civilians what it's really like to be in war. Some are written to change how things are. And I think Earhart wrote this poem to show the culture of obedience and what it can lead to, and the post-traumatic stress disorder which so many veterans are facing and so many Americans are ignoring.